the economic cost imposed by the judicial intervention.
Right.
So we have seen that judiciary is deciding what kind of standards are to be used in the cars. It is Bharat 5, Bharat 4, whether the crackers can be sold, whether certain companies can do certain things, whether Aadhaar can be used by the private companies or not. I think that judgment was very regressive. That has set back the India's fintech journey, and other countries will have the lead over us. But this arbitrariness of the judiciary, plus their judicial overreach, the economic cost, we've seen the coal blocks, by the way. I mean, both Congress and the BJP government pleaded with the Supreme Court, don't cancel the coal blocks. And they didn't listen, they went ahead to cancel it, and entire sector collapsed, and NPS just rose, and economy was in a doldrums. How do you see this kind of, judicial intervention in the economic issues, and what can be done about it?
So I'll answer this question in two layers. Let me answer it at the specific layer first, which is, see, with respect to each case, there is a decent chance that my opinions may differ. Okay, either with respect to coal blocks or with respect to Aadhaar, because I do believe, and I've said this even before, that while Aadhaar may have its own justifications, there are privacy concerns that I've always been very, very clear about. Okay, and regardless of which dispensation pushes Aadhaar, I will certainly ask two questions. Perhaps those questions which the left would disagree with, but these are the questions that I would certainly ask. Does Aadhaar facilitate greater normalization of illegal migrants in this country? And the evidence has been to prove my point. It has only supported my case, where Aadhaar has effectively increased accessibility of Indian resources to illegal migrants. They want us to call them undocumented citizens or undocumented human beings. Sorry, I refuse to call them that. They are illegal migrants because you guys are constitutional patriots. Illegal migrant is the only term recognized under Indian law. There is no concept of undocumented migrants. So you can really not use that term. I am entitled to use this term. Point number one. Point number two, as far as, let's say, the broader question of the judiciary's let's say, intervention on matters which are strictly executive in nature or even legislative in nature. This is perhaps a stark and a textbook example of good intentions paving the way to hell. Okay, and let's say this is largely called epistolary jurisprudence, which is to say PIL-based jurisprudence, which both Justice Krishna and Justice Bhagwati started in response to the Congress regime and its socialist apathy. Okay, where you were faced with a completely centralized, bureaucratized, heavily corrupt machinery, which had absolutely no apathy or, let's say, no sympathy or sensitivity towards the average citizen. And therefore, the judiciary was forced to rise up to that particular situation, I would say, because at least one arm of the state must do what the other arms have failed, was the basic concept behind it. Now, whether that has constitutional justification for it, it's still, according to me, is an open-ended question. Okay, however, the great thing about judiciary, or let's say the legal aspect, is we can always invent a doctrine where there is no support in the law. Okay, so it's called the doctrine of necessity, and that is the doctrine of necessity that ultimately translated to the collegium system also. So therefore, I am saying that what perhaps was the need of a particular hour has now become a luxury, wherein it allows a certain arm to express and throw its weight on every issue possible, which perhaps has led to a point where that particular arm or organ is losing its sheen and respect and majesty in the eyes of the common person, because it's I don't think there are any let's say advanced or semi-advanced jurisdictions where the top court of the country is constantly hogging the headlines. Okay, judiciary as an entity is typically expected to be reticent, reserved, and perhaps sparing and minimalist in its approach when it comes to expressing its views on matters of public policy beyond a certain point. Okay, the primary role is enforcement and interpretation, largely interpretation. Beyond that, when it comes to matters of legislation and policy, it should be left to the other arms. And therefore, I believe that we have to revisit this particular issue, not just from the standpoint of addressing questions of judicial overreach, but what is the role of judiciary that we as a people wish to accord in this particular country within the framework of the constitution. As long as that question is not addressed, and as long as the question of appointments is not addressed, as long as the question of accountability is not addressed, and as long as the question of wielding of contempt powers is not addressed, everything else is a ramification or a manifestation of the same Gangotri in different places and different issues. That is the broad issue. After the NJAC, which should have picked up steam, and after that judgment, there should have been greater discussions on why is it that this particular arm of the or let's say of the country seems so reluctant and reticent when it comes to scrutiny and examination. Why is it so averse to sunshine, so to speak, when it seems to be busy spreading sunshine in every other aspect of the country and every other issue? That is a discussion perhaps that needs to be had, but that calls for greater preparation and greater nuance, which I don't think most people have patience for at this point.
But like, I have been arguing for very long, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. I have been arguing that Supreme Court should be stripped off of every power except that of a constitutional court. Right. And especially the PIL route should be shut down, the Supreme Court, because judgment Supreme Court gives becomes law. So right. What it has done, it has basically subverted Indian democracy, that unelected people funded by shady sources can go to the Supreme Court with the PIL, enact law for the majority without going to the democratic process of contesting election and getting legitimacy to do so. And that is also harming the judiciary itself, because judiciary is exposing itself to the issues, to the public, which you should not be doing that. Because if you are making laws for the public without the mandate to do so, right. You are exposing yourself, you're building up a blowback, which right. might come and destroy you as well. Right. So that will be a chaotic situation. So tell me if I'm right in my thinking on this aspect.
So here's a counterfactual. Let me see what would your response to be to this. Assume for a moment that today there were a brute majority Congress government with about 300 to 400 seats, and the BJP is reduced to nothing in terms of a meaningful opposition. And the Congress chooses to legitimize and regularize over 5 crore illegal migrants in this country. And it chooses to do so at the expense of the territorial and cultural integrity of different parts of the country, in violation of Articles 355, 371A, and every other possible situation. It then chooses to relax all sorts of restrictions with respect to access of missionaries to the Northeast. It chooses to relax aspects with respect to FCRA. It chooses to repeal the amendment of 370. It chooses to repeal CAA. Now, as a person who really wants to challenge all of this, which forum do you think we can go to? And assuming that some of these issues are not strictly legal and they have a larger ramification, and you don't even have access to the PIL route, how do you then hope to have some kind of response? Assume for a moment that the judiciary's route is not available through a PIL, then you're looking at a situation where people will start exploring unconstitutional responses to certain constitutional activities. Okay. Judiciary, for all practical purposes, provides a certain vent for discussion. It provides a forum for a certain amount of churn. And that is one of the roles of the judiciary, which is perfectly, let's say, possible for us to accommodate, because most causes are looking for one thing: their day in court and their ability to be expressed in the highest court of the land, which translates to public knowledge, and thereby it changes public narrative. As someone who's argued in the Sabarimala case, where I had to face a wall of opposition and allegations of patriarchy and misogyny, trust me when I say this, that arguments in the Supreme Court are primarily responsible for changing the public narrative, notwithstanding the initial outcome, which is still not the final outcome. Okay. So I'm not going to be someone who supports stripping this particular institution of certain powers. I would go back to certain, let's say, questions, and I'll perhaps do a hit reset and go back to the drawing board stage and ask myself, how do I do a balancing act? Or is there perhaps another mechanism needed to deal with certain aspects when the government decides to behave in a certain fashion? And these questions have to be answered independent of the party in power or the dispensation in power, because what we choose to support under a certain government will come back to haunt us under another government. That's the reality of Bharat, and that's the reality across the board. Okay, so maybe certain mechanisms like a referendum, perhaps on certain critical issues, that has not been considered. Of all the stupid things that Arvind Kejriwal has ever proposed in his life, the one thing that he did of decent consequence, which should have been picked up, is the power of using a referendum to decide certain issues of national interest. I would say issues with respect to CAA and Article 370, its opposition could have been killed in one stroke if the silent majority had been given a mechanism to express its opinion through a referendum, thereby proving the entire nonsense and bogus about there being a silent majority which has a problem with these legislations. Okay. So in addition to creating safeguards with respect to existing institutions, perhaps there is a time to truly democratize the voice of the average man when you have access to Aadhaar, and you can have Aadhaar, and if you trust the Aadhaar system so well, then let's have a referendum system which is based on Aadhaar identification, That will tell us whether or not the government trusts its own Aadhaar identification. That's point number one. And second, if that can be used, let the public have a voice. Why should see, all of us are shouting on Twitter and on social media when perhaps it never translates to an opinion on an actual issue which has a consequence, a legislative consequence, a legal consequence. So all it is doing at this point is that it is an impotent safety valve. Beyond that, nothing. Okay. So strictly speaking, Abhinav, I may not be in support of the suggestion. Okay. I would certainly ask for greater re-examination and reconsideration of the powers it enjoys, and perhaps limiting the scope of its ability to interfere with certain issues. But history of this country tells us that the Supreme Court has stepped up on more than one occasion when brutish governments have chosen to run over a country's interests. That is also an equal reality that we must be alive to.
That's a fair point. And you basically now have started a new debate that whether we should have a referendum system in this country or not.